The night wind moved quietly through the tall pine trees surrounding the Silver Moon Pack territory. Moonlight spilled across the stone courtyard where pack members gathered after the evening hunt. Laughter and conversation filled the air, but Alara stood slightly apart from the crowd, her hands folded tightly in front of her. Alara was the wife of Damon, the beta of the Silver Moon Pack. For years she had stood beside him with loyalty and quiet strength. She cared for injured warriors, helped organize the pack's winter supplies, and treated every member with kindness. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. Because for 5 long years, Alara had not given the pack an heir. In the world of werewolves, the Luna of a pack was expected to do one thing above all else: continue the bloodline. Strength, wisdom, compassion, those qualities were respected, but they were never enough without a child. And the whispers had grown louder with every passing year. Alara could hear them even now. A group of she-wolves stood near the fire pit, their voices low but sharp. "She still hasn't conceived," one muttered. "5 years is too long," another replied. "The beta needs a fertile Luna." A third voice added coldly, "An infertile Luna brings weakness to the bloodline." The words struck Alara like quiet blades. She kept her expression calm, but inside, each whisper carved deeper into her heart. She had heard the same rumors countless times before. In the training grounds. In the kitchens. Even in the council hall. Everywhere she went, the same judgment followed her. Infertile. Useless. A burden to the pack. Alara lowered her eyes, pretending not to notice the glances thrown her way. She had learned long ago that defending herself only made the gossip worse. But what hurt the most was not the whispers. It was Damon. Her husband stood across the courtyard speaking with several warriors, his strong figure illuminated by the torchlight. Once, he would have crossed the space to stand beside her, to silence anyone who dared to insult his mate. Now, he said nothing. His silence felt heavier than the pack's cruel words. Alara took a slow breath, trying to steady the ache building in her chest. She had given this pack everything she had. Her loyalty. Her work. Her heart. Yet to them, none of that mattered. Because in their eyes, a Luna without a child had no value at all. The annual Pack Council of the Silver Moon Pack was never a small event. It was the most important gathering of the year, when the Alpha, Beta, Elders, and Senior Warriors met to discuss the future of the pack. Decisions made in that hall could change the lives of every wolf within their territory. Tonight, the council chamber was filled with tension. The room itself was large and circular, built from dark stone that had stood for generations. Tall torches burned along the walls, their flames casting long shadows across the wooden floor. At the center stood a heavy oak table carved with the ancient symbols of the pack. Around it sat the elders. Their faces were lined with age and authority, their eyes sharp with judgment. At the head of the table sat Alpha Rowan, the leader of the Silver Moon Pack. To his right stood Damon, the pack's beta, strong, respected, and known for his loyalty to the pack. And near the back of the room stood Alara. She had not been invited to speak. But as the beta's mate, she had the right to be present. Even so, she felt like an outsider standing there. The murmurs that had followed her through the pack for months now echoed inside the council chamber. Several elders glanced toward her with thinly hidden disapproval. Alara kept her posture straight. Her hands were clasped together to stop them from trembling. She already knew what this meeting was about. Everyone did. For 5 years she had waited, hoping the whispers would fade. But tonight, the whispers had turned into judgment. Alpha Rowan cleared his throat, signaling the start of the council. "Tonight we discuss the strength and future of the Silver Moon Pack," he announced. His deep voice filled the chamber. "Our borders remain secure, our warriors are strong, and our alliances hold." Several elders nodded. But the atmosphere remained heavy. Because there was one topic everyone was waiting for. Finally, Elder Garrick leaned forward in his chair. He was the oldest member of the council, his gray beard resting against the fur collar of his cloak. His reputation was known across the pack, wise, but merciless when it came to tradition. "There is another matter we must address," Garrick said slowly. His gaze shifted toward Damon. The room fell silent. Damon stood still beside the Alpha, his expression unreadable. "Ilara has served the pack faithfully," Garrick continued. "No one denies her loyalty." For a brief moment, Ilara felt a flicker of hope. But it vanished quickly. However, the elder added coldly, "The strength of a pack lies in its bloodline." Several elders murmured in agreement. Ilara felt her chest tighten. Garrick's eyes moved toward her. "You have been beta for 5 years, Damon," he said. "And yet your household remains without an heir." The words landed heavily in the chamber. Damon did not respond. Another elder spoke up, Elder Mira, a sharp-eyed woman who rarely softened her opinions. "The future of this pack cannot depend on uncertainty," she said firmly. "Our beta must have a mate capable of continuing the bloodline." Ilara felt every gaze in the room turn toward her. The weight of their judgment pressed against her like a physical force. Still, she remained silent. Because what could she say? She had asked herself the same painful question countless nights. Why had the moon goddess not given her a child? She had prayed. She had waited. But nothing had changed. Elder Garrick finally delivered the words everyone had been thinking. "If she cannot give you an heir," he said slowly, his voice carrying through the chamber. He paused. Then finished with brutal finality. "She has no place beside you." The words struck the room like thunder. Ilara felt the air leave her lungs. For a moment, the world seemed to go quiet. She looked toward Damon. Her heart held on to one fragile hope. That he would speak. That he would stand for her. That he would remind the council of everything she had done for the pack. Of the winters she spent organizing supplies. Of the wounded warriors she cared for. Of the countless nights she waited for Damon to return safely from battle. Surely he would say something. Surely he would defend her. But Damon did not move. He stood perfectly still. His jaw tightened slightly, but no words came. The silence stretched. Long. Painful. Ilara felt the fragile hope inside her chest begin to crumble. Alpha Rowan finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Damon," the Alpha said, turning toward him. "The council has raised a serious concern." Every wolf in the room waited. "Your mate has had many years," Rowan continued. "The pack must consider its future." Ilara held her breath. This was the moment. Damon could still change everything. He only needed to say a few words. Just one sentence would be enough. But Damon remained silent. His eyes stayed fixed on the council table. Not once did he look at Ilara. And that silence broke her heart more deeply than any insult. The elders interpreted his silence exactly as they wished. Elder Mira nodded slowly. "Your silence speaks clearly, Beta Damon," she said. Ilara felt something inside her chest collapse. The council chamber suddenly felt colder. The torches seemed dimmer. Everything she had believed about her place in the pack began to crumble. She realized something terrifying. Damon was not defending her. He was allowing the council to decide her fate. And deep down, he might already agree with them. Elder Garrick leaned back in his chair. Tradition exists for a reason, he said. The beta must strengthen the bloodline. Another elder added quietly, the pack cannot wait forever. The words blurred together in Alara's ears. She was no longer hearing individual voices. Only the heavy realization settling into her heart. She had always believed loyalty mattered. That devotion and kindness had value. But tonight she understood the truth of the pack's world. A Luna without a child was not seen as a partner. Not even as family. She was simply a failure. Alara lowered her gaze, refusing to let the council see the tears threatening to form in her eyes. She would not give them that satisfaction. Yet the pain inside her chest was unbearable. Because the man she loved, the man she had stood beside for 5 years, had chosen silence. And that silence was louder than any accusations spoken in that chamber. The council chamber remained silent after the elders finished speaking. The torches along the stone walls flickered softly, casting restless shadows across the room. For several long moments, no one said anything. Alara could feel the weight of every gaze in the room. The elders were waiting. The Alpha was waiting. But most of all, they were waiting for Damon. The beta of the Silver Moon pack stood beside the council table, his tall figure stiff and unmoving. His hands rested behind his back, his expression controlled. Anyone who looked at him would think he was calm. But Alara knew him better than that. Or at least, she thought she did. For 5 years she had stood beside him. She had learned the smallest details of his expressions, the way his jaw tightened when he was thinking, the way his eyes narrowed when he disagreed with something. Right now, his jaw was tense. Yet he still said nothing. Alara felt the faint hope in her chest begin to fade completely. Elder Garrick finally broke the silence. The council cannot ignore the future of the pack, the old wolf said firmly. The beta must have an heir. Another elder leaned forward, his fingers tapping slowly on the wooden table. There may be another solution, he suggested. The Alpha raised an eyebrow. Speak. The elder nodded toward Damon. Our borders with the Shadow Fong pack remain uncertain, he said. Their Alpha has requested a stronger alliance. Several council members exchanged thoughtful looks. Alara felt a strange unease begin to settle in her chest. The elder continued calmly, as if discussing trade goods rather than lives. They have offered cooperation in exchange for something valuable. The room grew quiet again. What exactly are they asking for? Alpha Rowan asked. The elder's eyes shifted briefly toward Alara. And suddenly she understood. A cold chill ran through her body. They require a Luna for their household, the elder said slowly. Someone educated in pack leadership, diplomacy, and healing. His meaning was painfully clear. Another elder nodded. Alara possesses those qualities. The words were spoken as if she were an object being inspected. A tool. Something useful. Not a person. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She looked toward Damon again. Surely this was where he would step forward. Surely he would refuse. Surely he would say that his mate was not something that could be traded like livestock. But Damon remained silent. The silence stretched long enough that the answer became obvious. Then finally, Damon spoke. His voice was calm. Too calm. If such an arrangement strengthens the pack, he said slowly, then it deserves consideration. Elara felt as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted. She stared at him in disbelief. Did she hear him correctly? The man she loved was considering it. Alpha Rowan studied Damon carefully. You understand what the council is suggesting, the Alpha said. Your mate would leave this pack permanently. Damon nodded once. I understand. The words felt like a blade sliding through Elara's chest. Still, she forced herself to speak. Damon. Her voice came out softer than she intended. Every head in the room turned toward her. For the first time that evening, she stepped forward. Is this truly what you want? She asked quietly. Her eyes searched his face, looking for some sign of hesitation. Some sign that the man she knew still existed. For a brief moment, something flickered in Damon's expression. But it disappeared quickly. The pack must come first, he replied. Those 6 words shattered everything. Elara felt the fragile pieces of her heart break apart. 5 years of loyalty. 5 years of standing beside him. 5 years of believing she was his partner. And in the end, she was only a problem to be solved. Elder Garrick nodded with approval. A wise decision, he said. Sacrifice for the good of the pack is honorable. Elara almost laughed at the cruelty of the statement. Sacrifice. As if she had chosen this. As if anyone had even asked her. The council continued discussing the details while she stood there in stunned silence. Dates. Terms. Agreements between packs. Her life was being decided in a matter of minutes. Not once did anyone ask what she wanted. Not once did anyone consider her feelings. To them, she was simply a resource that could strengthen an alliance. Eventually Alpha Rowan raised his hand, bringing the discussion to an end. The council approves the arrangement, he declared. The words echoed heavily through the chamber. Elara will be transferred to the Shadow Fong Pack at the next full moon. In exchange, the Silver Moon Pack will receive military support and expanded hunting rights along the eastern border. It sounded exactly like a trade agreement. Because that was exactly what it was. Elara stood motionless as the reality settled around her. This pack had been her home. These people had been her family. She had spent years serving them with loyalty and care. And now, they were giving her away like property. Her eyes slowly moved back to Damon. He still had not looked at her. Not once. That hurt more than anything else. If he had simply looked at her, she might have understood something. Regret. Guilt. Anything. But his gaze remained fixed on the council table. Cold. Distant. As if she were already gone. Elara felt the last piece of hope inside her finally disappear. The woman who had served the Silver Moon Pack faithfully was no longer seen as a Luna. She was simply a bargaining tool. And now she was being traded away like something that no longer had value. The journey to the Shadow Fong Pack territory took 2 long days. Elara traveled in silence, seated in the back of a rough wooden wagon pulled by 2 powerful wolves in human form. The road stretched through thick forests and rocky hills, the landscape growing darker and harsher the farther they traveled from the Silver Moon Pack lands. 2 warriors from her former pack accompanied the wagon. They were not there to protect her. They were there to make sure the delivery was completed. Neither of them spoke to her during the journey. They avoided her eyes, as if looking at her might remind them of the shameful task they had been ordered to perform. Elara said nothing either. What was there left to say? The pack she had served faithfully for 5 years had decided her fate. The man she had loved had chosen silence. And now she was being handed over to strangers. By the time the wagon finally stopped, the sun was beginning to sink behind the mountains. The sky glowed with deep shades of orange and red, but the beauty of the sunset did nothing to ease the heaviness inside Alara's chest. One of the warriors jumped down from the wagon. "We're here," he said shortly. Alara slowly climbed down. The first thing she noticed was how different the Shadowfang territory felt. The Silver Moonpack lands had always felt calm and organized. Their buildings were well maintained, their territory peaceful and disciplined. The Shadowfang pack was nothing like that. The air felt rough. The ground beneath her boots was packed with dark dirt and scattered stones. Large wooden structures stood around a wide clearing, many of them scarred by old claw marks and battle damage. The warriors who moved through the camp looked larger, rougher, and far less disciplined than those of Silver Moon. Many of them carried weapons. Some had visible scars across their faces and arms. Their eyes followed Alara immediately. Whispers spread quickly through the clearing. "So that's her. That's the one they traded. Alara of Silver Moon." The murmurs carried across the camp like ripples through water. Alara straightened her posture, refusing to let the weight of their stares push her down. If this was to be her new home, she would face it with dignity. But the whispers soon turned into open mockery. A group of warriors standing near the training grounds laughed loudly as she passed. One of them stepped forward, folding his arms across his chest. His smirk was cruel. "So this is the famous Luna they sent us," he said. Another warrior snorted beside him. "Not so famous," he replied. "Just useless." The first warrior tilted his head, studying her openly. "I heard she couldn't give her pack an heir," he said loudly enough for others to hear. Several warriors chuckled. Then someone behind them called out mockingly, "The infertile Luna!" Laughter erupted across the clearing. The words struck Alara like stones thrown at her chest. She had heard the insult before, but hearing it shouted openly by strangers made it feel even worse. A warrior leaned closer, his voice dripping with amusement. "Tell me," he said, "did they trade you because you're worthless, or because they were tired of waiting?" More laughter followed. Alara felt the sting of humiliation burning across her face, but she refused to show them weakness. She lifted her chin slightly. "I served my pack faithfully," she replied quietly. The warriors exchanged looks before bursting into louder laughter. "Served them," one scoffed. "If you had been useful, they wouldn't have traded you." Another added cruelly, "Maybe our alpha will find a better use for you." The implication in his voice was clear. Alara's stomach twisted with unease. She had heard rumors about the Shadowfang Alpha long before arriving here. Alpha Ragnar was known across several territories. Not for kindness, but for cruelty. Stories about him spoke of violent punishments, brutal leadership, and a temper that could turn deadly without warning. Some said he enjoyed breaking those who opposed him. Others claimed he treated weaker wolves as nothing more than servants. Alara had spent the entire journey preparing herself for the worst. Slavery, servitude, or something even darker. She did not know what fate awaited her here. But judging by the warriors' cruel laughter, it was clear that her reputation had arrived before she did. The insults continued as she walked through the clearing. The infertile Luna. Silver Moon's useless trade. Maybe she'll last longer here. Each comment chipped away at her dignity. Yet Alara kept walking. She refused to cry. She refused to break in front of them. Inside, her heart ached with a deep exhaustion she had never felt before. She had lost her home. Lost the man she loved. Lost the life she once believed in. And now she had arrived in a place where she was welcomed only with ridicule. As the warriors continued to mock her, Elara realized something painful. She had not simply been traded. She had been humiliated. Discarded. Thrown away like something broken. And now she stood in the middle of a pack that saw her as nothing more than a useless woman. The infertile Luna. And she had no idea what awaited her next. The mocking laughter in the Shadow Fawn camp had not fully faded when a sudden change swept through the clearing. At first, Elara noticed it in the warriors' behavior. The same men who had been laughing moments ago suddenly went quiet. Their postures stiffened. Several of them straightened immediately, as if an invisible command had just been given. Then a sharp voice cut through the air. "Stand down." One of the senior warriors rushed across the clearing, his eyes scanning the camp with urgency. Everyone form lines. Now. The casual chaos of the Shadow Fawn camp transformed almost instantly. Warriors who had been leaning against wooden posts or sharpening their blades quickly moved into formation. Something important was happening. Elara felt a strange tension ripple through the air. "What's going on?" she quietly asked one of the Silver Moon warriors who had escorted her. The man glanced toward the main entrance of the camp. His voice dropped to a whisper. "The Alpha King." Elara's heart skipped. The Alpha King? Even wolves from distant territories knew that title. Alpha King Kale ruled over all northern packs. He was not just a powerful alpha, he was the ruler who enforced order between the strongest packs in the region. Most wolves only heard stories about him. Some said he had defeated 3 rival alphas before he even turned 30. Others claimed his wolf was stronger than any other living wolf in the north. What everyone agreed on was one thing. Kale was feared. And he rarely visited smaller packs. Which made his sudden arrival even more surprising. A deep rumble of engines echoed from beyond the camp gates. Moments later, several dark vehicles rolled slowly into the clearing. Every warrior in the camp stood at attention. Even the loudest troublemakers lowered their heads respectfully. The vehicles stopped near the center of the clearing. For a moment, no one moved. Then the door of the lead vehicle opened. A tall man stepped out. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Elara had never met the Alpha King before, but the moment she saw him, she understood why others spoke of him with such caution. Kale was taller than most of the warriors surrounding him, his broad shoulders filling the dark coat he wore. His movements were calm and controlled, every step carrying a quiet authority. His black hair was slightly tousled by the wind, and his sharp features were carved with a natural intensity that made it difficult to look away. But it was his eyes that commanded the most attention. Cold. Observant. Unreadable. They scanned the camp slowly, taking in every detail with the quiet awareness of a predator. Several Shadow Fawn warriors lowered their heads further as he passed. Even the pack's fiercest fighters seemed careful in his presence. Kale did not speak immediately. He simply walked forward while 2 royal guards followed several steps behind him. Alpha Ragnar of the Shadow Fawn pack quickly approached, bowing his head slightly in respect. "Alpha King," Ragnar said. "Your visit honors our territory." Kale gave a small nod. "I am here for inspection," he replied calmly. His voice was deep and steady. Not loud. But it carried easily across the clearing. Elara remained near the edge of the camp, trying to stay unnoticed among the warriors. She had no desire to draw attention. But fate had other plans. As Kale's gaze continued moving across the camp, something suddenly changed. His steps slowed. Then stopped. His eyes locked onto her. Ilara felt it immediately. The moment his gaze landed on her, a strange sensation rushed through her chest. It was subtle at first. A faint warmth spreading beneath her skin. Then suddenly, her wolf stirred. Ilara stiffened slightly. Her wolf rarely reacted so strongly without reason. Before she could understand what was happening, Kale's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. It was so small that most wolves in the clearing did not notice. But Ilara saw it. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Just for a moment. Inside Kale's chest, something powerful had awakened. His wolf surged forward with sudden intensity. A single word echoed through his mind. Mate. The reaction was immediate. Raw. Instinctive. Kale felt his wolf push violently against the control he normally kept over it. His eyes remained fixed on the woman standing quietly near the edge of the clearing. She was not dressed like the Shadowfang wolves. Her posture was different. Her scent. Even from a distance, his wolf recognized it instantly. Mate. Kale forced his breathing to remain steady. His face returned to its usual calm, unreadable expression. But inside his mind, his wolf refused to quiet down. It paced restlessly, pushing the same word again and again. Mate. Kale had spent years controlling every instinct within him. He was the Alpha King. A ruler could not allow emotion or impulse to control his decisions. Yet the moment he saw her, something ancient and undeniable had awakened. And it refused to be ignored. Across the clearing, Ilara felt the strange pull growing stronger. She did not know why. She did not know who this powerful man truly was. But something about his presence made her wolf restless. Confused. Awake in a way she had never experienced before. The Alpha King continued staring at her for a few silent seconds. Then he finally spoke. Who is she? The question was simple. But it changed everything. Because the moment Kale noticed Ilara, the course of her fate had already begun to shift. The clearing of the Shadowfang pack had grown unusually quiet. Warriors still stood in their lines, heads slightly lowered in respect for the Alpha King, but their attention slowly drifted toward the same direction Kale was looking. Toward Ilara. Kale remained still for several seconds. His face revealed almost nothing, yet inside him a storm had begun to rise. The moment his eyes landed on the woman standing near the edge of the clearing, his wolf had reacted with sudden force. Mate. The word had echoed through his mind with an intensity he had not felt in years. Kale's wolf rarely spoke so clearly. But now the instinct pulsed through him again. Mate. Kale slowly inhaled, forcing calm into his breathing. Impossible. The word formed immediately in his thoughts. For years, Kale had accepted the possibility that he might never find his mate. Many powerful alphas lived their entire lives without discovering the one wolf chosen for them by fate. It was rare. But not unheard of. Kale had made peace with that possibility long ago. As Alpha King, his life was filled with responsibility, diplomacy, and power struggles between rival packs. Love or destiny had never been his priority. Yet now his wolf was pushing forward with a certainty that refused to fade. Mate. Kale's sharp eyes studied the woman carefully. She stood quietly near the back of the clearing, slightly apart from the Shadow Fong warriors. Her clothing was simple but clean, and though exhaustion lingered in her posture, she held herself with quiet dignity. But something about her presence felt different. She was not loud. She was not demanding attention. Yet Kale could not look away. His wolf stirred again, stronger this time. Mate. Kale clenched his jaw slightly. No. He forced the instinct down. It had to be a mistake. His wolf had been wrong before, rarely, but it had happened. Sometimes instincts reacted to unfamiliar scents or unusual energies between wolves. That had to be the explanation. Because the alternative made no sense. Kale had ruled over the Northern Territories for nearly a decade. During that time, he had met countless wolves from every pack under his authority. Warriors. Leaders. Heirs to powerful bloodlines. Yet his wolf had never reacted this way before. And now, suddenly, it was claiming a stranger standing quietly in a hostile camp? Kale's gaze narrowed slightly as he continued studying her. Something else caught his attention. The scent in the air. Faint. Subtle. But unmistakable. Sadness. Pain. And something deeper. A quiet resilience. Kale's wolf stirred again, restless. Mate. Kale forced himself to break eye contact for a moment, turning his attention toward Alpha Ragnar. But the strange pull remained. Even when he looked away, he could still feel her presence. It was like an invisible thread pulling gently at his instincts. He did not like it. Control was something Kale valued deeply. As Alpha King, he could not allow instincts alone to dictate his actions. He had learned long ago that emotions made leaders vulnerable. Yet this was something else entirely. Across the clearing, Elara felt the strange tension in the air. She did not fully understand what was happening. But she knew one thing. The Alpha King was looking at her. Not the way others had looked at her earlier, with mockery or curiosity. His gaze was different. Sharp. Focused. Almost searching. The moment his eyes had met hers, her wolf had stirred unexpectedly. Elara frowned slightly. Her wolf had been quiet for a long time. Ever since the whispers of infertility began spreading through the Silver Moon Pack, her wolf had grown distant and withdrawn. But now it shifted restlessly beneath her skin. Confused. Alert. She could not explain why. The sensation was strange. Unfamiliar. Yet not entirely unpleasant. Still, Elara quickly pushed the feeling aside. She had learned not to trust hope too easily. Her life had changed too drastically in the past few days. She had been traded away by the pack she served. Humiliated by strangers the moment she arrived. Whatever attention the Alpha King was giving her now, it could not mean anything good. Surely he had only noticed her because she was the outsider standing among Shadow Fong warriors. Nothing more. Yet Kale's wolf refused to calm. Mate. The word echoed again in his mind. Kale exhaled slowly, his patience wearing thin. He had faced enemy alphas without hesitation. He had commanded armies of wolves across dangerous territories. Yet now his own instincts were challenging him. He glanced back toward Elara once more. This time he looked more carefully. Not as a man reacting to instinct, but as a ruler observing someone important. Her posture was strong despite the tension around her. Her eyes did not lower in fear like many wolves did in his presence. There was sadness in them. Yes. but also quiet strength. That detail caught his attention. Most wolves in unfamiliar territory showed fear first. She did not. Kale felt his wolf shift again. Mate. He clenched his jaw slightly. He still refused to accept it. How could fate choose a woman standing alone in a hostile camp? A woman clearly unwanted by her own pack. Yet no matter how much logic he applied to the situation, the pull remained. Strange. Unavoidable. And impossible to ignore. The days following the Alpha King's arrival passed with a strange tension hanging over the Shadowfang pack. Most of the warriors assumed Kale had come only for inspection. His visits to different packs were rare but not unheard of. Usually he stayed only long enough to observe their strength, review their borders, and ensure loyalty to the Northern Alliance. But this visit felt different. Kale remained longer than expected. And although he carried out his duties as usual, his attention repeatedly drifted toward one particular person. Ilara. At first, she did not notice. After her humiliating arrival, Ilara had no interest in drawing attention to herself. She spent most of her time helping wherever she could, mainly in the small healer's hut near the edge of the camp. The Shadowfang pack lived harshly. Their warriors trained aggressively and fought often, which meant injuries were common. Many of them ignored wounds until they became serious problems. Ilara could not ignore suffering when she saw it. Helping others had always been her nature. Even when her own life was falling apart, she still found herself kneeling beside injured warriors, cleaning cuts, wrapping bandages, and preparing herbal mixtures she had learned during her years in the Silver Moon Pack. One afternoon, a young warrior staggered into the healer's hut with blood running down his arm. 2 others supported him, laughing carelessly. "Just a scratch," one of them said. Ilara looked at the wound and frowned immediately. It was far from a scratch. A deep gash cut across the young wolf's forearm where another warrior's claws had struck during training. "If you ignore this, infection will spread," Ilara said calmly. The warriors exchanged surprised looks. Most people in Shadowfang spoke with harsh tones or sharp orders. Her voice carried quiet authority instead. "Sit," she instructed the injured wolf gently. To his own surprise, he obeyed. Ilara cleaned the wound carefully, her movements steady and practiced. She applied herbs that helped prevent infection and wrapped the arm with firm, careful bandages. The young warrior watched her with curiosity. "You're not afraid of us?" he asked suddenly. Ilara glanced up. "Should I be?" The warrior shrugged. "Most outsiders are." Ilara tied the final knot in the bandage. "I'm more concerned about your arm," she replied. The warriors laughed quietly, but their laughter carried less mockery than before. Word of her skills began spreading slowly through the camp. At first, warriors visited the healer's hut only when their injuries became too serious to ignore. But soon they came earlier. Some even started asking for her directly. Ilara treated everyone the same. Patiently. Kindly. Without holding on to the insults they had thrown at her when she first arrived. Kale noticed everything. From a distance, he watched the quiet changes happening in the pack. He observed how the warriors approached her now with less cruelty and more respect. But what interested him most was how naturally Ilara handled every situation. One evening, raised voices echoed from the training grounds. 2 Shadowfang warriors stood face to face, their tempers flaring after a rough sparring match. "Watch your claws next time," one of them growled. "Then don't leave your guard open," the other snapped back. The tension rose quickly. Several other warriors gathered nearby, expecting the argument to turn into a full fight. Shadow Fang wolves were known for their explosive tempers. But before the situation could worsen, Elara stepped between them. Her movement was calm, unhurried. "Enough," she said. The two warriors looked at her in surprise. For a moment they seemed ready to ignore her. But something in her expression made them pause. "You're both injured," Elara continued. "If you keep fighting, you'll only make it worse." Her tone wasn't demanding. Yet it carried quiet authority. The warriors hesitated. Finally one of them scoffed and stepped back. "Fine." The other wolf rolled his shoulders and turned away. The crowd slowly dispersed. From across the clearing, Kale watched the entire interaction. His sharp eyes missed nothing. She had not raised her voice. She had not threatened them. Yet two aggressive Shadow Fang warriors had stepped down simply because she told them to stop. Kale felt something shift inside him. Later that evening, he passed by the healer's hut again. Inside, Elara was kneeling beside another injured wolf, carefully stitching a deep cut across his shoulder. Her movements were steady, focused, gentle despite the rough environment around her. The injured warrior gritted his teeth but did not complain. When she finished, he nodded awkwardly. "Thanks." Elara offered a small smile. "Try not to reopen it tomorrow." The warrior chuckled before leaving the hut. Kale remained standing outside for several seconds. Watching. Thinking. Everything he had seen during the past few days painted a picture that contradicted the rumors he had heard. She was not weak. She was not useless. In fact, she possessed something far more valuable. Leadership. Not the loud, aggressive kind that demanded obedience through fear. But the quiet kind. The kind that earned respect naturally. Kale's wolf stirred inside him again. Mate. This time, Kale did not immediately reject the instinct. Instead, a new realization formed slowly in his mind. The packs judged Luna candidates based on strength, fertility, and bloodlines. But Kale had ruled long enough to understand something deeper. A true Luna was not defined by children alone. A true Luna held a pack together. She healed, guided, balanced strength with compassion. And as Kale continued watching Elara move through the camp, helping warriors who once mocked her, a surprising thought crossed his mind. She has the soul of a true Luna. Several days passed after Kale arrived at the Shadow Fang pack, yet the strange feeling in his chest refused to fade. No matter how busy he kept himself with inspections and discussions with Alpha Ragnar, his attention continued drifting back to the same person. Elara. Each time he observed her, the same thought returned to his mind. She was nothing like the rumors he had heard. The Shadow Fang warriors had initially mocked her as the infertile Luna, a useless woman discarded by her own pack. But the woman Kale had been watching these past few days did not resemble someone weak or useless. She was calm under pressure. She treated wounded warriors without hesitation. And somehow, without raising her voice, she had begun bringing order to a pack known for chaos. Still, one question continued troubling him. Why had the Silver Moon pack truly discarded her? Even cruel packs rarely threw away a loyal Luna without reason. Kale stood near the healer's hut one afternoon, his sharp eyes watching as Elara finished wrapping the bandage around a young warrior's leg. The warrior stood carefully, testing his weight. "Feels better already," he said with a surprised grin. Elara nodded. "Stay off it for 2 days if you can." The warrior laughed. In this pack? That's unlikely. After he left, Kale stepped inside the hut. Ilara turned slightly when she heard the door move. For a brief moment, surprise flickered across her face when she realized who had entered. The Alpha King. She straightened quickly. Alpha King, she said respectfully. Kale studied her for a moment before speaking. You were Luna of the Silver Moon Pack, he said calmly. Yes. And they claimed you were unable to produce an heir. Ilara hesitated slightly before nodding. That is what they believed. Kale watched her carefully. There was sadness in her voice, but not bitterness. It made him curious. Did any healer confirm this? He asked. Ilara blinked. No. The answer surprised him. No examinations? Not beyond basic checkups, she explained. The pack healer believed it was simply fate. Kale frowned slightly. That seemed careless. Even smaller packs usually investigated such matters thoroughly. Kale turned toward the door. Stay here, he said. Before Ilara could ask why, he had already stepped outside. A few minutes later he returned with someone else. A tall woman with silver hair and calm, intelligent eyes. Ilara immediately recognized the clothing she wore. Royal healer robes. The woman gave Ilara a polite nod. I am Healer Seraphine, the royal physician of the northern packs. Ilara felt confusion growing inside her. Why would the Alpha King bring a royal healer to examine her? Kale spoke calmly. I want the truth. Seraphine turned toward Ilara. If you are comfortable, I would like to run a few examinations, she said gently. Ilara hesitated for a moment. Part of her felt nervous. For 5 years she had carried the painful belief that something inside her was broken. But another part of her, one she had almost forgotten, felt a small spark of hope. She nodded slowly. I understand. The examination took some time. Seraphine asked several questions about Ilara's health over the past few years. Then she used several herbal mixtures and scent-based tests commonly used among wolf healers to examine fertility. Kale waited outside the hut while the examination continued. His arms were folded across his chest, his mind restless. His wolf paced impatiently inside him. Mate. The word returned again and again. Kale ignored it. Right now he wanted answers. Nearly an hour passed before the healer finally stepped outside. Kale looked up immediately. Well? Seraphine's expression was serious. Alpha King, she said slowly, there is something very wrong about this situation. Kale's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? The healer glanced back toward the hut where Ilara waited quietly. She is perfectly healthy, Seraphine said. Kale stiffened slightly. Explain. She is not infertile, the healer continued. For a moment Kale simply stared at her. Not infertile? Seraphine nodded. In fact, her body shows every sign of normal fertility. Kale felt his wolf surge with sudden intensity. Mate. The word echoed loudly again. But Kale ignored the instinct, focusing instead on the healer's explanation. Then why has she been unable to conceive? He asked. Seraphine's expression darkened. Because something interfered with her body. Kale's gaze sharpened. What kind of interference? The healer took a slow breath before answering. A potion. Kale's eyes hardened instantly. A fertility-blocking mixture, she explained. A rare one. It does not harm the body directly, but it prevents conception. Kale felt a cold anger begin forming in his chest. How long? Seraphine thought for a moment. Based on the traces I found, several years. Kale's jaw tightened. 5 years. The same amount of time Alara had been unable to conceive. Someone gave this to her intentionally, the healer said quietly. The words hung heavily in the air. Kale's gaze turned toward the healer's hut where Alara sat alone, completely unaware of the truth that had just been uncovered. For years she had believed she was the problem. Believed she had failed her pack. When in reality, someone had sabotaged her. Kale's wolf growled deep inside him. Mate. This time, Kale did not silence it. Because now the situation was no longer just mysterious. It was personal. Someone had destroyed this woman's life. And Kale intended to find out who. The truth about Alara's infertility weighed heavily in Kale's mind. For years she had carried the shame of something that was never her fault. The Silver Moon Pack had judged her, whispered behind her back, and eventually discarded her like something broken. Yet the royal healer's discovery had changed everything. She had never been infertile. Someone had made her appear that way. And Kale intended to uncover the truth. He stood inside Alpha Ragnar's meeting hall that evening, the dim firelight reflecting in his cold eyes. Several of his royal guards stood nearby, while healer Seraphine carefully prepared a small table of herbs and vials. Across the room stood Alara. She had only recently been told what the healer discovered. The news had shaken her deeply. For 5 years she had blamed herself. Every whisper, every insult, every cold glance from the Silver Moon Pack elders had made her believe she was somehow defective. Now that belief was crumbling. If she had never been infertile, then someone had betrayed her. Are you certain? Alara asked quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Seraphine nodded. I have confirmed it twice, the healer replied. A fertility-blocking potion remained in your system for years. Alara slowly sank into a chair. Her mind raced through memories she had tried to bury. 5 years. 5 years of confusion. 5 years of watching Damon grow more distant. 5 years of hearing whispers from pack members. All because someone had poisoned her. But who? Kale watched her carefully. He could see the shock in her eyes, but beneath it was something else. A growing anger. A realization that the life she lost had been stolen. We will find the truth, Kale said calmly. His voice carried quiet authority. Alara, he continued, think carefully. Who had access to your food or drinks regularly during that time? Alara frowned slightly as she tried to remember. In the Silver Moon Pack household, meals were usually prepared by servants, she said slowly. But there were occasions when someone brought you drinks or herbal mixtures directly, Seraphine added. Alara's thoughts moved back through years of small details. Faces. Moments. Conversations. Then suddenly something surfaced. A woman. Tall. Beautiful. Ambitious. Her name formed slowly in Alara's mind. Lydia, she whispered. Kale's eyes narrowed. Who is Lydia? Alara looked up, her expression darkening. She served in the Beta household, she explained. At first she worked among the staff, helping manage the living quarters. Alara's voice grew quieter. But Damon began trusting her more over time. Seraphine exchanged a glance with Kale. Did she ever give you drinks or herbs? Alara nodded slowly. Yes. The memory returned with painful clarity. During the early years of her marriage, Lydia had often brought herbal teas meant to improve fertility. At the time, Ilara had believed the woman was simply trying to help. She said they were healing mixtures, Ilara murmured. Cale's expression hardened. And Damon allowed this? Ilara hesitated. He believed Lydia was knowledgeable about herbal remedies. But even as she spoke, a terrible realization began forming inside her. There had been moments when Lydia looked at her strangely. Moments when the woman seemed almost pleased when another month passed without pregnancy. And there had been rumors. Whispers among servants. Rumors that Lydia spent increasing amounts of time with Damon. Ilara's heart sank. She wanted my place, Ilara said quietly. Cale folded his arms. The beta's Luna position. Ilara nodded slowly. If I could not produce an heir, Damon would eventually be forced to choose another mate. Seraphine spoke carefully. And Lydia would be the most convenient choice. Silence filled the room. The pieces of the betrayal began fitting together with cruel clarity. For years Lydia had slowly poisoned Ilara's chances of having a child. Each month that passed made the whispers grow louder. Each year that passed made the elders more impatient. And eventually the council had turned against Ilara completely. But the betrayal did not end there. Cale's gaze sharpened further. There is still something missing, he said. Ilara looked up. The elders. Cale's voice grew colder. You said the council pressured Damon heavily. Ilara nodded. They insisted the pack needed a fertile Luna. Cale paced slowly across the room. If Lydia was secretly poisoning you, someone would have noticed. The beta household was not small. Servants. Healers. Guards. Someone had to know something. And if the elders suspected the truth, why had they said nothing? Ilara's expression slowly changed. Another memory surfaced. One she had pushed aside at the time. During one council meeting, Elder Garrick had watched her closely when Lydia entered the room with tea. Not suspicious. Not surprised. Almost knowing. Ilara's stomach tightened. I think they knew, she whispered. Cale stopped walking. Explain. Ilara took a slow breath. The elders never trusted me fully, she said. My family came from a smaller pack before I married Damon. She looked down at her hands. They always preferred someone from stronger bloodlines. Seraphine spoke quietly. And Lydia? Ilara's voice hardened slightly. Her family had long-standing connections with several elders. The room fell silent again. The truth had become painfully clear. Lydia had poisoned Ilara for years to destroy her reputation. But the elders had allowed it to happen. Because removing Ilara from power benefited them as well. Cale's eyes darkened with cold fury. A pack had betrayed its own Luna. Not through open attack, but through years of silent cruelty. And when Ilara finally broke under the pressure, they had traded her away like unwanted property. Cale's wolf growled deeply inside him. Mate. The word echoed again. This time filled with something darker. Protective anger. Someone had destroyed her life. But now the truth had been uncovered. And Cale knew exactly what would happen next. The Silver Moon Pack would answer for their betrayal. The Great Hall of the Northern Council had never been so crowded. Representatives from every pack across the Northern Territories had gathered for the annual summit. Alphas, betas, elders, and warriors filled the massive stone chamber, their voices blending into a low hum of conversation. Tall pillars lined the hall, carved with ancient wolf symbols representing generations of pack alliances. Long banners hung from the ceiling, each displaying the crest of a different pack. At the center of the chamber stood the raised platform where the Alpha King addressed the council. Tonight, however, the atmosphere felt unusually tense. Whispers spread through the crowd as many wolves noticed the presence of the Silver Moon pack sitting near the front. Their alpha, Rowan, looked uneasy. Beside him stood Beta Damon. His expression remained controlled, but inside he felt the pressure of hundreds of watching eyes. It had been several weeks since Alara had been traded to the Shadow Fang pack. The alliance agreement had already been finalized. To Damon, the matter should have been closed. Yet rumors had begun spreading across the northern territories. Rumors that the Alpha King himself had taken interest in the discarded Luna. Damon dismissed most rumors. But standing in the Great Hall tonight, a strange unease settled deep in his chest. Something felt wrong. Across the chamber, another group of wolves entered. The murmurs immediately grew louder. The Alpha King had arrived. Kale walked calmly through the massive hall, his presence commanding attention without effort. His black coat flowed behind him slightly as he moved, royal guards following several steps behind. Every wolf in the room lowered their heads respectfully as he passed. Kale stepped onto the raised platform and turned to face the council. Silence spread across the hall instantly. His sharp eyes slowly scanned the gathered packs. He saw them all. The loyal, the ambitious, and the guilty. Finally, his gaze settled on the Silver Moon pack. Damon felt the weight of that gaze like a physical force. Then Kale spoke. "Tonight we discuss the order of the Northern Territories," he began calmly. His voice carried easily through the hall. "Unity between packs ensures our survival." Several alphas nodded. For a few minutes, Kale addressed routine matters, border agreements, patrol coordination, and trade routes between territories. But many wolves sensed that something more important was coming. Finally, Kale paused. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. "There is another matter that must be addressed." His voice had changed slightly. More serious. More deliberate. Every wolf in the chamber leaned forward slightly. Kale stepped down from the platform. Instead of remaining above the crowd, he walked directly into the center of the hall. The movement confused many of the watching wolves. The Alpha King rarely stepped down during council meetings. But tonight was different. Kale turned toward the entrance of the hall. "Bring her forward." The doors opened slowly. Soft murmurs spread instantly. Alara stepped inside. She wore simple clothing, but the calm strength in her posture drew immediate attention. The weeks she had spent among the Shadow Fang pack had changed her slightly. She no longer carried the broken uncertainty she once had. Instead, she walked with quiet dignity. The moment Damon saw her, his body stiffened. Shock flashed across his face. "Alara? Why was she here?" Whispers spread rapidly through the hall. "That's the woman Silver Moon traded away. The infertile Luna. Why did the Alpha King bring her?" Alara walked calmly until she reached the center of the chamber. Kale stood beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kale turned slowly to face the gathered council. His voice echoed clearly across the hall. "This woman," he gestured toward Alara, "was traded away by the Silver Moon pack." A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs moved through the crowd. Kale continued. "They claimed she was unworthy." His gaze moved toward Damon and the elders of Silver Moon. They claimed she could not bear an heir. Damon felt his throat tighten. Where was this going? Cale's expression remained cold. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. This woman you traded away. He paused deliberately. Is my true mate? The entire hall exploded with shocked gasps. Several alphas rose halfway from their seats. The elders of Silver Moon stared in disbelief. Damon's face turned pale. Mate? Ilara stood frozen beside Cale, her heart racing as the words echoed through the chamber. She had known Cale felt a strange connection with her. But hearing him declare it so openly, in front of every pack, still felt unreal. The murmurs grew louder. How is that possible? She was discarded by her own pack. The Alpha King's mate? Cale raised his hand. Silence returned instantly. Then he spoke again, his voice carrying the authority of a ruler who could not be challenged. And she will stand beside me. He turned slightly toward Ilara. As my Luna Queen. Another wave of stunned silence swept through the hall. The meaning of those words was enormous. Not only was Ilara the Alpha King's mate, she would now become Luna Queen of all northern packs. The same woman who had been mocked, rejected, and traded away would now hold one of the most powerful positions in the entire territory. Cale's gaze returned to the Silver Moon pack. Cold. Unforgiving. You discarded her. His voice dropped slightly. But fate had already chosen her. Across the hall, Damon felt something inside him collapse. The woman he had allowed the council to trade away had just become the most powerful Luna in the north. And there was nothing he could do to change it. The great hall remained heavy with silence after Cale's declaration. Even the strongest alphas in the northern territories seemed stunned by what they had just witnessed. No one had expected the Alpha King to reveal his mate in such a dramatic way, especially not a woman who had been publicly discarded by her own pack. Whispers still floated through the hall, but they were no longer filled with mockery. Now they carried something else. Shock. Respect. And fear. Because everyone understood what this meant. The woman the Silver Moon pack had traded away was now Luna Queen of the Northern Territories. And the pack that betrayed her would now have to face the consequences. Cale turned his cold gaze toward the Silver Moon pack delegation. Alpha Rowan. Beta Damon. His voice echoed across the chamber. Step forward. The command carried the weight of royal authority. Neither man could refuse. Alpha Rowan slowly stood from his seat, his expression tense. Damon followed beside him, though his movements were noticeably slower. The walk to the center of the hall felt longer than it truly was. Hundreds of eyes watched them. Some with curiosity. Others with quiet judgment. When they finally reached the center of the chamber, Damon could not stop his gaze from drifting toward Ilara. For a moment, he barely recognized her. She looked different. Stronger. The quiet sadness that once filled her eyes had faded, replaced by calm confidence. Standing beside the Alpha King, she no longer looked like a woman who had been discarded. She looked like someone who belonged beside power. Damon felt a sharp twist of regret in his chest. For weeks he had convinced himself that trading her had been the right decision for the pack. That it had been necessary. That Ilara had simply been unfortunate. But now, seeing her standing beside Cale, he realized something terrible. He had not just lost a mate. He had lost someone far more valuable. Cale's voice broke the silence. Your pack traded this woman away under the claim that she was infertile. Alpha Rowan nodded slowly. That was the information provided to us, he said carefully. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly. The royal healer has confirmed that claim was false. A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. Damon's head snapped upward. False? Kale continued calmly. Ilara was not infertile. The words struck Damon like a physical blow. He stared at Ilara, his mind struggling to process the information. Not infertile? Then the past 5 years? The council meetings. The whispers. The decision to trade her. All of it had been built on a lie. Kale's voice grew colder. She was deliberately poisoned with a fertility-blocking potion for years. The hall erupted with shocked voices. Alpha Rowan looked stunned. Damon's face drained of color. Poisoned? Kale's gaze hardened further. The individual responsible has been identified. He did not say Lydia's name yet. But Damon already knew. Memories flooded his mind instantly. Lydia bringing herbal teas. Lydia offering fertility remedies. Lydia whispering concerns about Ilara's inability to conceive. A sickening realization formed in Damon's chest. He had trusted the wrong person. And in doing so, he had destroyed the life of the woman who truly cared for him. Damon looked at Ilara again. This time, his expression was filled with something new. Guilt. Regret. And desperate realization. He stepped forward suddenly. Ilara. His voice cracked slightly. The hall grew quiet again as everyone watched the moment unfold. Damon lowered his head. I didn't know, he said quietly. Ilara said nothing. For the first time in years, Damon truly saw the weight of everything she had endured. The loneliness. The humiliation. The silence he had chosen instead of defending her. His chest tightened painfully. I should have protected you, he continued. His voice was softer now. I should have questioned what was happening. He lifted his head slowly. Please, forgive me. The words echoed across the silent hall. Some wolves shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with fascination. It was not common to see a beta beg in front of an entire council. But Damon no longer cared about pride. Because the truth was painfully clear. He had failed her. And now she stood beside another man. A far stronger one. Ilara looked at him quietly. For several seconds she did not respond. Inside her chest, emotions moved slowly through her heart. Memories of the life she once had. The love she once believed in. The nights she cried alone while Damon grew colder toward her. But those memories no longer held power over her. Because that life was gone. And the woman standing in this hall was no longer the same one who had once begged for acceptance. Finally, Ilara spoke. Her voice was calm. Clear. You traded me like property. The words cut through the hall like a blade. Damon flinched slightly. Ilara continued. You stood silent while they judged me. She met his eyes directly. For 5 years I gave everything to the Silver Moon Pack. Her voice did not rise. But every word carried quiet strength. And when the council decided I was no longer useful. She paused briefly. You let them give me away. Damon's shoulders sank lower. The weight of her words pressed heavily on him. Ilara took a slow breath. Then delivered the final sentence. Now live with the cost. The hall fell completely silent. Damon closed his eyes briefly. Because deep down, he knew she was right. And some mistakes could never be undone. The silence that followed Alara's words felt heavier than any punishment. Hundreds of wolves filled the great council hall, yet no one dared to speak. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Damon remained standing in the center of the chamber, his head lowered. The weight of his choices pressed down on him like a mountain. For the first time since becoming Beta, he truly understood the consequences of his silence. But this moment was no longer about him. It was about justice. Kale stepped forward slowly, his presence commanding the entire hall. The murmurs that had been spreading through the crowd instantly faded into silence again. The Alpha King's expression had grown colder. Much colder. His gaze swept across the Silver Moon Pack delegation, lingering on each elder seated behind Alpha Rowan. For years, they had held power within their pack. Respected. Feared. Untouchable. But tonight, they stood before a ruler whose authority surpassed theirs entirely. Kale spoke. The truth has now been revealed. His voice carried through the chamber like thunder. Alara was not infertile. The words echoed against the stone walls. She was deliberately poisoned for years by someone who sought to take her place. Many wolves in the hall exchanged dark looks. Some shook their heads in disgust. Kale's eyes hardened. The woman responsible is Lydia. A wave of whispers spread across the chamber. Several alphas recognized the name immediately. Lydia had often appeared beside Damon in the later years of his leadership. Kale continued. She secretly administered a fertility-blocking potion to Alara over the course of several years. His tone remained calm, but there was a dangerous edge beneath it. Her goal was simple. He paused briefly. To remove Alara from power and claim the Luna position for herself. The crowd reacted with anger. Growls of disapproval spread among the gathered wolves. Betrayal within a pack was already a serious offense. But poisoning a Luna for personal gain was something far worse. Kale raised his hand slightly, and silence returned again. The crime has been confirmed by the royal healer. He turned toward the guards standing near the hall entrance. Bring her forward. The massive doors opened again. 2 royal guards entered, dragging a struggling figure between them. Lydia. Her once perfect appearance had been replaced by panic and fury. Her hair was disheveled, and her eyes darted wildly around the chamber as hundreds of wolves stared at her. This is a lie, she shouted. Her voice echoed sharply. You can't prove anything. But the fear in her voice betrayed her confidence. Kale looked at her without emotion. The potion traces remain in Alara's system, he said calmly. The healer identified the exact mixture. Lydia's face turned pale. And servants from the Beta household confirmed you personally delivered herbal drinks to Alara for years. Her protests died in her throat. The evidence was overwhelming. Kale's gaze grew even colder. For poisoning a Luna and manipulating pack leadership for personal power. His voice dropped slightly. You are hereby banished from all northern territories. The hall erupted with shocked murmurs. Banishment was one of the harshest punishments a wolf could receive. A banished wolf lost pack protection. Lost territory. Lost identity. It was a life of isolation and survival. Lydia fell to her knees. No, she screamed. You can't do this. But Kale did not even look at her again. Remove her. The guards dragged her away as she continued shouting and struggling. Her voice faded as the doors closed behind her. The hall grew quiet again. But Kale was not finished. His attention shifted toward the elders of the Silver Moon Pack. You allowed this betrayal to happen. The accusation struck them like a physical blow. Elder Garrick tried to speak. We had no proof. Kale interrupted him. You had suspicion. His voice sharpened. And you chose silence. The elder's face tightened. Kale stepped closer. You judged Alara without investigating the truth. His eyes moved from one elder to another. You allowed ambition and politics to destroy one of your own. No one dared respond. Because they knew he was right. Kale's verdict came swiftly. Effective immediately. His voice rang through the chamber. You are stripped of your council titles. Gasps echoed around the hall. The elders stared in stunned disbelief. Their power gone in a single sentence. You will no longer hold authority within the Silver Moon Pack, Kale continued. And your decisions will be reviewed under royal supervision. But the punishment did not end there. Kale turned toward Alpha Rowan. Your pack failed to protect one of its own. Rowan's shoulders sank. He knew what was coming. The Silver Moon Pack will lose royal protection. A wave of shock spread through the chamber again. Royal protection meant military support, trade security, and political stability among the northern packs. Without it, a pack became vulnerable. Territory disputes, rival attacks, economic collapse. The consequences would be severe. Rowan bowed his head slowly. We accept the judgment, he said quietly. Kale studied him for a moment before nodding once. The decision was final. Across the hall, many wolves watched with mixed emotions. Some felt sympathy. Others believed the punishment was deserved. But everyone understood the message. Betraying a Luna, especially one chosen by fate, was not something the Alpha King would ever tolerate. Beside Kale, Alara stood quietly. She had spent years carrying the pain of injustice. Years believing she had failed. Now the truth had been revealed to the entire Northern Council. And the pack that once discarded her was watching its power crumble. Justice had finally arrived. The great council hall slowly returned to silence after Kale delivered his final judgment. Moments earlier the chamber had been filled with shock, anger, and disbelief. Now a different feeling had taken its place. Respect. Hundreds of wolves remained standing in their places, watching the woman beside the Alpha King. Ilara. Only weeks ago she had been mocked as the infertile Luna. A woman discarded by her own pack, humiliated by warriors, and traded away like a political tool. Now she stood at the center of the Northern Council. Not as a victim, but as Luna Queen of the Northern Territories. The transformation felt almost unreal. Kale stepped forward again onto the raised platform, his dark coat shifting slightly as he turned toward the gathered packs. Ilara, he said calmly. His voice carried through the chamber. Step forward. Ilara walked slowly to stand beside him. Her movements were steady, though deep inside her heart was still adjusting to everything that had happened. Just days ago she had believed her life was over. Now the fate of dozens of packs had changed because of her. Kale looked across the chamber. From this moment forward, he declared, Ilara stands beside me as Luna Queen. The words echoed across the massive hall. One by one, the gathered alphas lowered their heads. Then their betas followed. Soon the entire chamber bowed in respect. The same wolves who once whispered cruel rumors now bowed before her authority. Ilara felt a strange wave of emotion rise in her chest. It wasn't pride. It wasn't revenge. It was something deeper. Closure. For years she had believed those whispers defined her. That the pack's judgment meant she had failed. But standing here now, watching powerful alphas bow their heads, she realized something important. Their whispers had never been the truth. They had simply been blind. When the wolves slowly raised their heads again, many of them looked at Alara with curiosity and respect. They had watched everything unfold. They had seen the Alpha King defend her. And they had seen the truth revealed. Now they understood what the Silver Moon Pack had lost. Kale turned slightly toward her. For a moment, the entire hall faded into the background as their eyes met. Kale's expression softened just enough to show something genuine. Something warm beneath his usual calm authority. "You stood strong when others would have broken," he said quietly, though his words still carried across the hall. Alara looked at him silently. For years she had searched for acceptance from the wrong people. Now the one person whose judgment mattered most stood beside her. Kale continued. "They saw your weakness." His gaze briefly swept across the hall, where several wolves looked away in quiet shame. "Your silence. Your pain. They believed those things made you unworthy." Alara listened carefully. Because she understood exactly what he meant. Kale's voice grew firmer. "But I saw something different." He stepped slightly closer. "I saw your strength." The words were simple. But they carried enormous weight. Kale had not chosen her because she was perfect. He had chosen her because he understood what true strength looked like. Not loud power. Not dominance. But quiet resilience. The kind that endured years of pain without losing compassion. The kind that continued helping others even after being betrayed. Alara felt warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in years, she no longer felt the need to defend her worth. Because someone had already seen it. And believed in it. Kale turned back toward the council. "Leadership is not measured by bloodlines alone," he said firmly. His words addressed every alpha in the chamber. "A true Luna does more than produce heirs." He gestured toward Alara. "She protects her people. She heals. She unites a pack when conflict threatens to tear it apart." His voice echoed with quiet authority. "That is the strength I saw in her." The hall remained silent as many wolves reflected on his words. Some of them had witnessed Alara's actions in the Shadow Fong Pack. How she helped injured warriors. How she calmed disputes. How respect had grown around her naturally. Now they understood. Alara had never been weak. She had simply been surrounded by those who refused to recognize her strength. Kale finally turned back toward her once more. "Stand beside me," he said quietly. Alara nodded. Together they faced the gathered council. For years Alara had stood in rooms where wolves judged her. Where whispers followed her. Where she felt small and powerless. But this moment felt different. She no longer stood alone. She stood beside the most powerful alpha in the north. And more importantly, she stood as the woman she had always been. Strong. Compassionate. Unbreakable. The true Luna the world had once failed to see. But now, every pack in the Northern Territories knew her name. Months passed after the Great Council gathering. Life across the Northern Territories slowly settled into a new rhythm. Under Alpha King Kale's leadership, the packs grew more united than they had been in years. Patrols along the borders became stronger, rival conflicts faded, and trade between packs flourished. But the greatest change was not political. It was personal. For the first time in her life, Ilara felt truly at home. The royal territory where Kale ruled was vast and peaceful, surrounded by dense forests and guarded by loyal warriors. The palace itself was built from stone and ancient timber, standing proudly at the center of the land. And now it was Ilara's home. As Luna Queen, she quickly became respected among the northern packs. Not because Kale demanded it, but because she earned it. Ilara spent her days visiting different packs, helping improve healer networks, organizing supply routes, and listening to the concerns of wolves who had never before felt heard by leadership. Warriors respected her compassion. Pack healers admired her knowledge. Even older alphas who once doubted her found themselves acknowledging her wisdom. Quietly, naturally, she became the heart of the Northern Alliance. Yet the greatest change was within Ilara herself. The heavy shadow she once carried, the belief that she was broken, had slowly disappeared. Kale never allowed those old doubts to return. He treated her as an equal. A partner. A queen. Still, one question had quietly lingered in Ilara's mind. A question she rarely allowed herself to think about. Could she truly have children? The royal healer had confirmed the poison was gone from her system. But after years of believing she was infertile, hope felt fragile. She did not want to risk disappointment again. One quiet morning several months later, Ilara stood in the royal garden. The air smelled fresh with early spring flowers. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees, casting warm patterns across the stone pathways. She had been feeling slightly tired lately, though she blamed it on her busy schedule. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. Ilara. She turned to see healer Seraphine walking toward her. The healer carried a small leather pouch filled with herbs and medical tools. "Good morning," Ilara said with a gentle smile. Seraphine studied her carefully. "You have been feeling unusual lately, haven't you?" Ilara blinked. "A little tired," she admitted. "But nothing serious." The healer's eyes sparkled slightly. "Perhaps we should check." Ilara felt a small flicker of nervous curiosity. "Check what?" Seraphine motioned toward a nearby bench. "Sit." Ilara obeyed. The examination was simple. The healer used scent-based tests, gentle pulses of healing energy, and a few herbal indicators common among wolf physicians. For several minutes, Seraphine remained silent as she worked. Then suddenly, the healer froze. Ilara noticed immediately. "Is something wrong?" she asked quietly. Seraphine slowly lifted her gaze. But instead of concern, a wide smile spread across her face. "Ilara," she said softly, "you are not ill." Ilara frowned slightly. "Then why have I been feeling?" Seraphine interrupted gently. "Because you are pregnant." The words seemed to hang in the air. For a moment Ilara simply stared at her. Pregnant? Her mind struggled to process what she had just heard. "That's impossible," she whispered. For years she had been told the opposite. She had lived half a decade believing she could never carry a child. Seraphine shook her head. "It is very possible." Her smile grew warmer. "And the signs are very clear." Ilara's hand slowly moved to her stomach. 1,000 emotions rushed through her at once. Shock. Joy. Disbelief. Tears filled her eyes before she even realized they were coming. All those years. All those nights she cried quietly, wondering why she had failed. It had never been her fault. And now, Now life was growing inside her. But Seraphine had not finished. "There is something else," the healer added. Ilara looked up. "What do you mean?" Seraphine took a slow breath. "The child you carry is not just any heir." Her voice carried quiet excitement. "You carry the bloodline of the Alpha King." Ilara felt her heart race even faster. Alpha King bloodline heirs were rare. Kale's lineage came from one of the oldest and strongest wolf families in the Northern Territories. Children born from that bloodline often carried extraordinary strength. Seraphine placed a gentle hand over Ilara's. "This child will be incredibly powerful." Ilara wiped the tears from her face, still smiling through disbelief. Later that evening, Kale found her standing on the palace balcony, watching the sun set over the forest. He approached quietly. "You seem happy today." Ilara turned toward him, her eyes shining. "I have news." Kale studied her expression carefully. "What kind of news?" Ilara stepped closer. Then softly placed his hand over her stomach. Kale froze. For a moment his usually calm expression cracked with pure surprise. "Ilara." She nodded, smiling through happy tears. "Yes." Kale's wolf surged forward inside him with powerful excitement. "Mate." He pulled her into a tight embrace. The Alpha King, who rarely showed emotion, now looked genuinely overwhelmed. The woman the world once called infertile, the woman who had been discarded and humiliated, was now carrying the future of the strongest bloodline in the Northern Territories. A new generation. A new legacy. And proof that fate had been working quietly all along. The woman once called useless would now become the mother of one of the most powerful bloodlines in werewolf history. Sometimes the world rejects you not because you lack value, but because it cannot see the strength within you. People judge too quickly. They listen to rumors, follow traditions blindly, and decide someone's worth based on shallow expectations. In Ilara's case, an entire pack believed she was weak simply because she could not give them an heir. They ignored her loyalty, her kindness, and the quiet leadership she offered every day. To them, she was a failure. But the truth was very different. Ilara had never been weak. She had been patient when others were cruel. She had shown compassion even to those who mocked her. She had continued helping others even when her own heart was breaking. That kind of strength is rare. Sometimes it takes the right person to recognize it. While the Silver Moon Pack saw only her supposed weakness, Kale saw something deeper. He saw courage, dignity, and resilience. He saw the heart of a true Luna, the kind who protects, heals, and unites others. And when someone finally saw her true worth, everything changed. The woman who had been rejected became a queen. The woman called infertile became the mother of a powerful future. Her story reminds us of something important. Your worth is not defined by the opinions of people who fail to understand you. Sometimes the very people who discard you are simply blind to your true value. And somewhere in the world, there will always be someone who sees the strength that others overlooked. When that moment comes, the same world that rejected you may suddenly realize what it lost. So never allow rejection to define who you are. Because the right person, the right opportunity, or the right moment may reveal that the strength inside you was always there, waiting to be seen.